As an ex-Christian and now present-day occultist, I see the Bible as any other mystical text. It has good stories, good proverbs or sayings, good parables or riddles with meaning. And it's got, it's interesting stuff. But I don't see it as anything sacred or anything special, and I certainly don't see it as the one and only true book in the world. And the Bible, of course, is not a book. It's a book of a collection of books written over hundreds and hundreds of years, spanned within hundreds and hundreds of years. And, of course, obviously, multiple different authors of the different books, but we don't know who they were. We don't know who those authors were. Be that as it may, now I have a video that I made and uploaded a few years ago, and then when I changed channels and things, I redid it and, re-uploaded, and it's here on this channel. It's titled Christianity, Fear-Based Spiritual Extortion, if you want to check it out. And when I uploaded that video, someone had commented and said that I didn't understand the Bible because salvation is free. Because in that Bible, I'm talking about how I had worked for 37 years to wanting to please this Bible God. I knew that salvation was free, but that's typical of Christians. They only listen with their filter on. They only hear what they want to hear. At least the majority of Christians do. And this Christian was trying to correct me and say, well, salvation is free. That was your mistake. You were thinking you had to work for your salvation. No, that's not what I said in the video. You can go check it out. It's on this channel. I clearly said that I was wanting to please that God and do the right things. Even though he saved me and I'm free, it's automatic, right? If you believed in the theology of once saved, always saved. But the New Testament does clearly say that a believing Christian who becomes an unbeliever or willfully sins, as it says in the Epistle of Hebrews, can lose their salvation. But anywho, that's typical of Christians, though. They, the majority of them, and I ought to know. I was one for 37 fucking years. I repented of that wickedness. But I'm not here to Bible bash or bash the Bible or bash Christians in general. I am here to bash those who think that they're so snide and self-righteous or know-it-all. I know the Bible very, very well. And recently I made a comment in a podcast that I was a guest on that there was no Bible prohibition against child molestation, child rape, which I think is wicked and evil, that it's not even in there if it's supposed to be such a inspired book, the Bible. And of course, there's always the Christian that will bring out the rebuttal. Well, what about Matthew 18, 6, I believe it is, and Luke 17, I think it's 2, verse 2 there. And it talks about, if you offend a child, that you better a millstone be tied around your neck. But that's not what that verse says, or those verses say. But before I go any further, I don't want to, there's Bible verses like Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy 22, it talks about, some people think it means that if a woman's raped, that she has to marry her rapist. If she's single when she was raped, she has to marry her rapist. That's not literally what that says. I'm going to be honest. Deuteronomy 22, 28, 29. It's talking there, the word seize, when a man seizes a woman and he lays with her, then and she's a virgin, he has to give the father a dowry, and then he has to marry her and he can never divorce her and all this kind of shit. I can see where people think that it's talking about she has to marry a rapist. The thing of it is the problem with the word seize. We're not really sure about that. Maybe he seduced her. Maybe he, whatever. So I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to say that that's saying you have to marry your rapist. Now there's a Bible, and that's in, of course, Deuteronomy 22, chapter 22, verses 28 and 29. Now Ezekiel 23:20 says that it says of the woman that she lusted after her lover's genitals, which were big as a donkey's, and his emissions were as much or as a horse. In other words, he had a dick as big as a donkey, and his cum was the amount of a horse's cum. That's pretty X-rated. But anywho, and there's other Bible verses like that, so there's that. But Christians, some Christians are so pious they want you to watch your language, right? Why? Because if you say fuck, it's referring to maybe to a sexual intercourse. or shit because it refers to bile. Now, I mean, I could make a video, and I have in the past years ago, one of my previous channels, about how when I was a Christian, and I said, I don't think there's such thing as bad words. There's bad things to say, like lie or blasphemy or things like that, but bad words themselves is made up by man. This is man making up shit. Now, let's go back to this whole millstone thing and tying it around the neck of someone who harms a child. That's not what the fucking verse says, no matter what translation you use. The verse says anyone, it talks about a child and children, the children of God is who it's talking about in context. And it says, and I'll prove it in a second, it says anyone calls those children to stumble. To stumble. And then later on in the epistles, you have Apostle Paul talking about, not want to offend their young brother and sister in Christ, a new believer. Don't want them to stumble and offend them, by doing something that they may think means that they can sin too, because you're doing something is not sin, but they may think it's sin, so you don't want to do it in front of them. So if you look it up, Matthew 18:6, Luke 17:2, you look it up. Those young ones are not little children. Jesus said that such as the kingdom of heaven is little children, childlike faith. And it clearly says, and as far as I know, just about every common translation, it says, those that believe in me. Well, little children that are, 5 years old, 3 years old, that are being molested and stuff like that, are you saying that they believe in Jesus? That most of them don't even know who Jesus is, So the whole believe in me, that's the stipulation of those children in those verses. So this disingenuousness of Christians who want to say, well, there is a Bible verse, it's in the New Testament, and it's in the Gospels, where you get a millstone tied around your neck if you molest or rape little children. Now, I personally believe that's what should happen to you. I just recently did a video where I talked about real men should stand up for the victims of rape, whether they're children, female or male victims of rape, that people should stand up for them, and that if, you're one of these MAGA people or whatever that, covers for Trump because of, he's saying, you made a snide-ass gaslighting statement about we still talking about Epstein? And then they flood the world with all these so-called Epstein files. 6 million of them. Isn't that an interesting number? 6 million. So Pam Blondie had 6 million pages of documents on her desk. That's what the bitch said. But anywho, I don't want to digress on that. But the point being is that I've already made a video that I think that anyone that rapes anyone, a child, a fucking animal for that matter, a human, adults, doesn't matter, male, female, you should be executed, period. If you're absolutely found guilty, you should be fucking executed, period. And anybody that covers up for you or tries to divert from what you've done or anything like that, they're just as guilty in my eyes. They're molesters just in my eyes too, and rapists. But anyhow, so the whole Matthew 18:6 thing about, you offend one of these little ones, it'd be better than a millstone tied around your neck. And no one understands that it clearly says in the verse, those that believe in me are the children he's speaking about. And the stumbling, how do you get molestation and rape, something violent and harmful like that, and stumble? Now, we all know that harming children is wrong. We don't need a Bible verse to say so, or a Jesus or anyone else to say so. But the Bible in the Old Testament and New Testament does not condemn molestation, nor does it condemn vandalism for that matter. And the point being the only point that I'm making here is that the Bible is not the end-all, begin-all. It doesn't cover everything because it's not a perfect book. It's a collection of books written over hundreds and hundreds of years of different dozens and dozens of writers. 66 books is in the King James version of the typical Bible. But even if you include the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha, if you include those, you're still not going to find any prohibitions against raping children, molestation. In the Old Testament, women and children were considered property. You were either the property of your father or whoever the patriarch of your household was, your uncle or whatever, and when you were married, then you're the property of your woman, of your husband. And children were thought of the same way. Now, here's the thing. People will throw that out in the New Testament. What about the Old Testament? I mean, Christians like to cite the Ten Commandments and other things from the Old Testament. How come there's no prohibition? Now, there's prohibition against eating shellfish and swine and wearing clothing with mixed materials, sowing, when you're gardening and you're sowing seeds, you can't have mixed seeds. You can't work on the seventh day Sabbath. You can't work on it. There's all these prohibitions, but there's nothing mentioning no raping or harming children. Now, again, I believe morality is in our heart. We don't need no text to say so. We don't need no legal system with its legalities telling us murder and theft is wrong. We all know that. We don't. So, but my point being, I was just talking about the Bible. I'm not saying the Bible condones molestation in the Old Testament or New Testament or rape. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that I still stand on what I say. There is no Bible verse directly prohibiting the raping or even the beating and assaulting of a child. So that tells me, again, not to condemn the Bible. It's just a collection of writings. Not to condemn Christians that believe in the Bible. That's fine if you want to believe in it. I did for 37 years. I believed it was the holy writ of the maker of the universe. But it does not condemn those type of things. And when Christians are dishonest and they want to say, oh, yes, it does. I remember having a conversation one time at a kitchen table with two professional theologians, Bible teachers and stuff. They had websites, and one of them had a church at one time and things like that, and a congregation. And the one asked the other, said, let me ask you, brother, do you know of any Bible verses that prohibit, molesting of children and things like that? And the other one said, he literally cited Matthew 18:6. He said, that's the only one, and I just interrupted both of them. I said, no, it doesn't. Sadly enough, it doesn't. And I said something else it doesn't prohibit, but we know it's wrong, is vandalizing people's stuff. Vandalizing. It talks about stealing people's stuff. That's wrong. But vandalization, like molestation, just aren't covered in the Bible. And people, though Christians defend it because they can't stand the idea that something that they know in their heart is wrong, we know it's wrong, and evil and wicked. And I think that there's no lowest form of human being than a molester. Actually, I think all bullies are pieces of shit. But a molester and a rapist are the ultimate bully. But, I think politicians are bullies and things like that. So, anyhow, that's a different story. But to throw that verse out and to claim that is, that covers it. My Bible's sacred. You don't know what you're talking about. It's like the Christian that responded to my video about Christianity and fear-based religion. I'm sitting in my truck and my coworkers are out here goofing off, playing around, hitting the horn and teasing each other. But anyhow, I just wanted to wrap it up with that this whole snide idea that, yes, it does. See, my book is perfect. Instead of saying, no, it don't. It don't. That's because the Bible doesn't have to tell you what's right or wrong, because it's not your guide of morality. It's in your heart. And as an anarchist, when I was a Christian, I always called myself a Christian anarchist, and I am to this day an anarchist, just not a Christian anymore. I'm an occultist, but I'm not an anarchist. Some people will say, well, you're a Satanist. Yeah, I'm a Satanist. I'm a Satanist in that the Bible character Satan I see as the good guy. But I don't believe in a real Satan nor a real Bible God. Nor do I believe the Bible is supposed to be used as a book to tell you what's moral and immoral. It's just a collection of writings, a collection of books by different authors over a long periods of time telling stories. Some of the stories are cool. Some of the stories are bullshit, just totally fucked up. And with good proverbs and sayings and good parables and mystical, sayings and things like that are really cool. But if you don't believe in Christ and somebody causes you to stumble, I'm just using the Bible verses, then no millstone gets tied around the person that causes someone to stumble who believes in Christ. The millstone's supposed to be around their neck. But if you call someone who doesn't believe in Christ, they're not considered one of the children, according to the very Bible verse you all like to cite when I tell you the fact that there is no Bible prohibition against molestation of children. And that is showing that the Bible is not a complete book. It's not to be taken literally. And it took me 37 years to learn that. Have a great day.